Good morning. Welcome everybody to the Recruit Me podcast. Today we have Jessica Jackson. Jessica is an HR and payroll professional with experience both in the public and private sector. She studied hospitality management at Montclair State University and spent the early years of her career working in the customer service field. After finding her niche of building teams, human resources was her clear path. Jessica worked in the hospitality industry as a human resources representative for several years before transitioning to local government. For the past 5 years, Jessica has worked in both finance and administration for the township of North Brunswick and has served as a payroll and pension fund supervisor and personal officer. Throughout her career, Jessica has demonstrated her ability to adapt to the needs of the employees and streamline and update policies and procedures. So happy to have you today, Jess. It's been a long time.
Yes. Good morning. Good morning. Great to see you.
Good morning. So Jess and I actually had worked together, as mentioned on LinkedIn, and we always just had very common, similar ideas on things. And if there was ever anything I wanted to get done or that Jess wanted to get done, she was the first person to make it happen. So I'm excited to have you today and talk more about your background and things for our listeners. So first, I know I just gave a little bit of a bio about you, but if you can sort of tell us a little more about you and your background and where you are today.
Sure, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me, Katerina. It has been a while, like you said, but no, so I started, just like you said, customer service. I'm a talker, and that if you're going to go into hospitality or customer service, if you're a talker, or if you love engaging with people, that's the route for you. So as I got into that role, I loved building teams. I loved the fact of team building, encouraging. Something you'll hear me probably say a couple times, and for the next 30 minutes or so will be people working for people. That's my MO. I truly believe it in my heart. So once I started realizing, hey, these people, they say if I go somewhere, they're going to follow me. Okay, so that's kind of how that developed. And I've taken that with me throughout my career. I've obviously transitioned into an HR role. I started off doing like an administrative type of HR, more of the tangibles rather than the intangibles, where it was, very administrative paperwork, things of that nature, removed from the employees. But now, in the past 5 years, I've worked in public sector, and I started off in payroll. We launched a brand new payroll system, payroll HRIS system, which again, you'll probably hear me say a million times how much I love them during the next half an hour. But I really feel that the two go hand in hand. You have to really understand your payroll system when you're in HR. Not that you have to be knee deep in it and know every single little nuance, but the two departments do coincide and work very closely together behind the scenes. And I think a lot of employees don't know that. It's really something that I think is great to have an all-encompassing HRIS system that can handle that. So I'm a huge advocate of having a program like that. I've used Prime Point in the past 5 years from the ground up. And so kind of going back into myself, not to get off on a tangent, I'm definitely somebody who always is asking a million questions. And some people can find that really annoying. I'll be the one in class always raising my hand, or, if we're at a conference or a meeting, I'm the first one to stick my hand up. And I think it's very important for any young professionals to really be engaged and asking questions and wanting to know the why behind things. So in my current role, which I'm transitioning to a new township this coming week, it's a similar situation where I have to, engage in maybe a new vendor, like a payroll HRIS system, and really kind of analyze, why things are being done the way they are. You kind of have to get out of your mindset. And I think we'll see that. Personally, I know that somebody like my mother, who's just retiring, we're going into this time in our life where you have a lot of people retiring and then a lot of new people coming in. And this is the great opportunity to change things. So tying in the HRIS systems or whatever systems your company may use, whatever your industry is, and having those fresh ideas, asking those questions. That's what I'm all about. That's what I think a lot of our young professionals are about nowadays too. And, I think it's great to see that transition in the workforce also. So it's a little bit about me, a little bit what I'm about. And, I'm always, like I said, I could talk to you probably for hours just asking questions back and forth to each other because I
Right.
think we're both very similar in that aspect.
Yes. Well, congratulations to your mom. That's so exciting, retiring. And I think you hit the nail on the head of so many people retiring, so many people joining the workforce. And you really touched on HR and payroll, and you can just hear that passion when you're talking about it. So what does it mean to you, right? To so many people, whether it be a company or it be an employee, oh, it's HR and it's payroll. But why is it such a crucial piece to really any organization?
I think the most important part, obviously, people want to make sure that they're compensated correctly for the job that they're doing and accurately, and also that they're being heard, like they matter. I mean, personally, I know that if I do something great, in my personal life, it's nice to have a friend or a family member recognize that. And it goes the same for your professional life too. So, I think the most important thing that people need to realize about human resources and payroll is that, we are behind the scenes, we are there to help. And as long as you have the right people in place, it will make such a difference in how your company, your business, is. A lot of things we see now, you have companies like these big companies like Google and Amazon with these crazy benefits and, oh, you can take a nap, you can do this. That's great. But there's so many other industries out there where you have someone who's, a hostess at a restaurant, or you have someone who's a manager at your local store. They don't have those kind of, perks and benefits, these small businesses. So even if you are a small company and you have that one person who's maybe wearing 10 hats, maybe they are the CEO, the HR person, the payroll person, the risk manager, they do everything because it's their own company. When you do have to focus on the HR and payroll side of it, you kind of have to change your communication method or flex your communication style with your employees because, they may need to come to you with an issue that they're having that's a little uncomfortable. And a lot of times what I've seen in the past X amount of years is that people just want to be heard. They may not always want an answer. They just want to be able to feel that they can come to you with a problem. And I think that's one of the biggest things for me and what I've seen. And obviously, when people are getting ready to retire, or if people, are just starting a new job, you have a family, or you're living at home trying to save up for your new place, whatever your circumstance may be, you want to make sure that you understand how you're getting paid. And of course, now, with the Equal Pay Act, we know how much everybody makes. It's not a secret. You can divulge that information. But if I'm a young professional just starting my career and I look at my paycheck and there's all these different codes and numbers, I'm going to say, what on earth is this? If this is my first professional job.
Right.
So I think there should be that transparency too with whoever you're, as an employee. You should feel comfortable with asking, who's my HR rep, or who should I go to if I have payroll questions. In small companies, it's probably going to be the same person. In larger companies, it might be several people, but you need to feel empowered to ask those questions that you need to understand, because we're all human. We all make mistakes. That's not to say that your paychecks will be wrong all the time, but I think that as an employee, you need to understand that there are resources and it's okay to ask questions. I would get phone calls. I can't tell you how many times people would call and say, I'm sorry to bother you. And I would say, it's my job. This is literally my job. You're not bothering me. And I always explain to people whatever the question is that they may have. And sometimes it's as silly as, oh, Okay, well, that makes sense. Or it's an error that was made. So to me, whether it's a small business, whether you're a large company, whether you're just starting off your job, whether you're getting ready for retirement, whatever the case may be, just utilize your HR and payroll department and know that they're there to help you. If you don't feel that they're there to help you, then they may have, the wrong people in place, but just know that their job is to make your life easier and for you to get paid accurately for the time that you worked.
Right, right. Do you feel or have you seen that maybe companies aren't utilizing their HR department as best as they can? And are there ways that either in a company or an employee can better utilize? You mentioned and touched on that. And I think even me, myself, you forget to utilize that piece of the company. And I think companies do the same at times.
Absolutely. It depends on the organization, honestly, and what the mission statement of the employer is, whether you're in public, private, small business, mid-size to, huge companies. So I definitely feel that there are positions and there are people who feel that HR is this, I don't want to use the word fluffy position, but it's like you can't see anything, there's no results. Well, you can. I mean, this, there are so many analytics, there are so many programs, but a lot of executives that are maybe new or have done things a certain way for a long time, they don't care about that. They just, they're very business minded, which is why they became business owners to begin with. And that's great. But we're seeing such a shift in the dynamic of personnel in the workforce. As I touched on earlier, you have a lot of people that are retiring, and the mindset of maybe the people such as my parents are different than the younger generation. And yes, we like all those perky benefits, like the nap pods and this, that, and the other, but we just want to feel valued. We want to make sure that what we're doing is acknowledged. And that's how I can say for myself in my mid-30s that, I'm midway through my career and I still like all of that. You did a great job and it's good to hear that. So going back to how companies really aren't utilizing their HR departments, I think for the most part, you have to have the right people in place. And for some companies, perhaps they haven't really had exposure to the right person in that role. It is changing, it is growing and developing. There are a lot of standards, industry standards, that maybe companies that have been around for the past 20 years or so have never utilized. But now this is what all the other companies that are, starting off with are looking at. They're looking at your conversion rate. They're looking at your turnover rate. How long are your employees staying there? What is it? Are you doing exit interviews? And are you sharing those results with your staff members, with not only the executives of the company, but of the departments themselves? Your managers, maybe you only have 2 managers, maybe you only have a staff of 10. But if you have a turnover, where you're having 5 people come and go in a 6-month period, there must be some kind of common factor there. So while yes, it's great to have the software, the staff, the resources to be able to analyze those things, you can still do these in a smaller company. And I think that a lot of business owners, a lot of executives, a lot of leaders in those positions in an industry really need to invest their time, not even just the money, because it's not even that expensive. It's going to cost you more in the long run to keep going through people. And we in the industry know that, but they may not. And our job is to educate them. So to make sure that you really have the buy-in from the top, and you really understand, that you have whoever your leader is in your company really understand the importance and the value that HR brings, then I think it can really, translate into seeing those positive results, into retaining your employees, into increased productivity, things of that nature. And again, this all ties into the payroll program too, because there are so many great HRIS programs out there that you can house everything at once. And when you have that one company that you're using for all, it really streamlines everything. It keeps everything in a nice, pretty little package with a bow on it. and the systems integrate seamlessly with one another. There's so many out there that are available, whether you're a small business or a large business. So having people who are also very forward thinking too nowadays, I think is a huge, huge asset. Because again, me personally, I'm midway through my career, but again, as I said before, I'm asking questions all the time, constantly asking questions to the point where it's really annoying. And that's in my industry, that's great for me because I always want to know. I'm not set in my ways, and you need to be able to adapt. You need to be able to change. You need to be able to look at the whole picture. And we may not like change. I don't really like change that much, but you have to sometimes. And your employees appreciate that. The employees want to see that you are adaptable, that you're not rigid, that you're flexible, that you can change not only your communication style, but the way that you process things, such as your paychecks, going from paper checks to only direct deposit. That's a big deal for some people who always like to go to the bank on payday and cash their check. So it's little things like that that I think companies really need to look at a larger picture. You will end up saving money in the long run if you do invest where it counts, such as your HR department. And usually you can use them for payroll too if you are a small company. So it really isn't as expensive or, mind-blowing as some people might think.
Yeah, it can be daunting. And I think you touched on a lot of different pieces, advice really for leaders, right? Not just companies as a whole, leaders in general at those companies. Maybe those leaders are running those companies, but what maybe mistakes then are you seeing leaders make, or have you seen leaders make that you would say, here's my piece of advice? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's sounding like having some sort of software or system is almost like if you don't, you're setting yourself up for failure. So I'm assuming that's going to be a big piece, but are there other things too that you are saying, got to do this, you got to do that?
I think the most thing is to educate yourself. I was not an HR major in college. And once I realized this is what I want to do, I did everything I could to learn. And I'm still learning and I'm still growing. Educate yourselves as leaders. If you're going to be in a position of leadership, then you need to make sure that you understand what that entails. It just doesn't mean being the boss. There are a lot of laws and rules and regulations that are always changing, whatever state you're in the country, maybe even in your township. You never know. I think that's the most important thing, is to continue to educate yourself. There are things that maybe 15, 20 years ago, you could say to an employee, you can't say those things anymore. You're going to get a lawsuit, you're going to be sued, and it's not going to be pretty for anybody. So you really need to think of all the things when you are in a position of leadership. And if you have that person in HR who you can go to, you can ask questions for, or say, hey, Joe Smith is really making me nuts. I want to get rid of him. Of course, your HR person is going to say, well, did you write them up yet? Did you document this?
I'm having deja vu here.
Yes. Document. And you may have somebody who grew into that leadership role in the company and has had never managed anybody before. I think that the training is so crucial. The continued learning is crucial. I think that as whatever company you're in, you're always growing, you're always developing, you always are trying to move forward and see whatever's new, whatever resources you can utilize. But you need to make sure that you're doing it the right way. And of course, yes, having these programs, it's huge. It's a game changer. Some companies, smaller companies, just use QuickBooks, and that's great. But for a little extra money, you can have something else that they'll take care of a lot of things for you. And of course, depending on the size of your business and the budget, things of that nature, there are going to be limitations. But at least to have a game plan. There's so many free resources out there. Definitely join SHRM. I think it's like a $200, $250 annual membership. Be a member of SHRM. They have so many resources. It doesn't matter if you're in HR or not. I think if you're a leader in any company or trying to attain that path, it's always great to educate yourself. See what's out there. Join the community, message boards. Get into your local chapters. Go anywhere where you have local networking events, because you're going to be talking to peers that are just like yourself. and everybody's learning and growing. I said it earlier, I'll say it again. We're all human. We all make mistakes. There may be something that passed today that I didn't know about, but one of my peers could say, hey, did you know about, this update, this change? No, thanks for sharing. So it's things of that. I think it's the most important piece is really continuing to want to learn, to want to know what's changing, to want to know, what's expected out there, because the workforce today expects totally different things than the workforce 10 or 15 years ago. And I think that continued desire to want to learn and to be fresh and to know what's expected is really the most important. Learning. I can't say it enough.
Absolutely. Can't disagree with you there. And for those that don't necessarily know, if you can elaborate more on what exactly is SHRM.
Sure. SHRM is the Society for Human Resource Management. It's basically, I think it's globally recognized. And they do have, you can become SHRM certified. There is a test, there's preparation courses, but this is basically, go to shrm.org, I believe it is, shrm.org. And it's every kind of facet of human resources or legal kind of, I guess you want to say, legal advice. It's not legal advice really, because they're not lawyers. But it's just a resource for anybody to use if you have questions about your personnel and anything that has to do with that. They have forms, templates, there's forums that people can ask questions. There's a labor update. There's federal updates. They email you. I mean, I can't tell you, I have my own folder where things just automatically go there because they email so much, but that's good. You may not get a chance to look at it right away, but when you do have the opportunity to, you need to look at those. When we had the sick leave law come up in 2018, that was huge. The equal pay law, when that passed, huge. Those are things you need to be aware of. And you're not alone. We're not alone in this. We're all in the same boat. We're all walking down the same path, and we're all here to help each other. So again, people working for people, get your network together, make sure that those people you can rely on that are going to be your resources when you have those silly questions, because I can't tell you how many times I've called ex-coworkers and said, I have a question. Can you tell me how you're doing this? Because you need to know and you want to know. And it's not that somebody's doing it right, wrong. It doesn't matter. You just want to be able to talk that out. And SHRM is a great resource for that, for other professionals in that industry.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. Definitely think it's great for our listeners as well. And I think, like you touched on, people working for people starting new jobs, it can be daunting. The workforce has changed. What kind of advice do you have for someone who's starting a new job, or maybe they're looking for a new job, and then, they're not sure what they're doing. They're in that mindset. What kind of advice can you share?
I think the most thing is just educate yourself and make sure that you're always putting your best foot forward. I think that when you are confident in what you're doing, it shows, right? If you're passionate, my 2-year-old loves toy fruit and vegetables. Don't ask me why. I don't know, but he does. So I'm going to encourage him, right? He's confident about that. He sees any fruit or vegetable, he's saying banana, apple. I mean, he's 2 years old. So, but trying to correlate that into, somebody who's just starting off in their career or may not have a desire, know what direction they're going or not know all the ins and outs. Just be that sponge, right? Be the sponge, be always asking questions. If somebody gets mad at you for asking too many questions, well, it's not you, it's them probably. Maybe because they don't know the answers, or maybe because nobody's ever asked them that before and they really don't have the answer. So they don't know what to say. But I think the most important thing is always be learning, be a sponge, be an advocate for yourself, know what your self-worth is. We all take pride in everything we do, right? We're human, we make mistakes, but to be able to say, listen, I'm new at this. It's not going to be perfect, but I'm going to try. We're all different learners too, right? I'm a visual learner. I need to see it and then I'll do it. Some people need to read the instructions. They'll sit there, they can look at it once and they're done. They know how to do it in and out. Other people need to learn by doing. They have to actually do it themselves and understand. And that's fine. I think you need to look at yourself and say, how do I receive information? And that way when you are training or when you are starting a new job, you already go in knowing, okay, my supervisor gave me this manual to read, and maybe you don't process information that quickly by just reading things. Then you can partner with somebody and say, I was given this. Can I watch you do it? Or can you explain it a little more to me? Knowing that about yourself, I think will set you up for success. I think as people, we all know what our quirks are, what our strengths, what our weaknesses are. And if you don't, that's okay. It's okay not to know those things, but you need to start asking yourself those questions. You need to really be comfortable with yourself and know when you're going into a new situation, how you're going to get to how you're going to succeed, how you're going to set yourself up to succeed, because you don't want to get into a situation where you just are overwhelmed or don't know what resources to tap into. Educate yourself about whatever you're going to be doing, whatever industry. Know that, maybe you're just trying it out. Maybe you're just trying to put your foot in the door and see if it's for you. And that's okay. It may not work out for everybody in certain things. I know I've dabbled in different things. They say, nope, not for me, not going to happen. And that's okay. When you're just starting out, it's fine. Or even if you want to change career paths, I changed career paths, and I was almost 30 years old. So it just varies, but you have to make sure that you are the best person you can be, that you know your strengths, your weaknesses. You're not afraid to ask questions, that you know how you're going to process information, that you're willing to take those chances. And you're not always going to succeed. We're all going to fail. It happens. It's inevitable. And know that it's okay. It's not going to be the end of the world. You'll be okay. And if anything, you're going to learn and grow from it. So that's really the best advice I can give anybody who's really starting off or switching gears or may not be certain about what they want to do. It's okay.
Very helpful advice. Amazing. And you touched on changing careers. And I think this great resignation and this, post-COVID world of so many individuals changing industries, reevaluating their experiences. What kind of advice can you give to someone maybe teeter-tottering on, I'm looking to make that jump. I just felt uneasy about it. You going through it personally, what kind of advice can you share? What did you learn from that experience?
I think the best thing you can really do is just learn, and network. When you're switching industries, all the people that you knew before, all the resources you had, everybody, maybe they all knew your name. Maybe it was a small company and you all knew about each other's, personal lives, and you're so ingrained, you're going to keep those relationships. And when you're going into a new career path, you can always reach out to the people who, you developed those relationships with before in your previous career.
Right.
And you've established those relationships. And again, yes, people working for people, but if what I didn't translate into, my current industry, I'd still probably call the same people and just say, I just need to bounce an idea off of you. Sometimes you need that reassurance. And it can be very challenging, in your personal life. Of course, if you have significant others or family members or friends who are encouraging you or discouraging you, that can always sway you too. So that's a big piece of it. Now, if everybody's on board and say it's a perfect world and you say, listen, this is not for me anymore, I'm switching gears, this is what I want to do, you kind of have to be prepared that you might have to start at the bottom, and that's okay also. I say that a lot too. It's okay. Everything's fixable. Everything's figure outable. And it's okay to start at the bottom. When I switched into one company, I knew that, the work I was doing was work of a title that was much higher, but I started at the bottom. I did what I had to do. I learned. You have to be that sponge again. Be the sponge. Learn everything you can. Learn the whys behind things. And if you'll know if it's something that you really are passionate about and want to do, switching careers. If you don't feel energized, or not that everybody's energized at 8 a.m. without coffee. I get that. That's not what I'm trying to say. But if you don't feel that, you want to keep learning, you want to keep figuring things out, you want to understand, you want to change things for the better, like to improve them, like, oh, it's been done this way for so long, there's a much easier way to do it. If you don't feel that way, it may not be for you. You want to always be actively engaged in whatever you're doing. And if you make that shift and you make that move into whatever the new career path is, and you find yourself doing that, then it sometimes doesn't matter that you're at the bottom, because you feel that there's that self-fulfillment. I went to a seminar in, I think it was November this past year, and there's a phrase that one of the speakers said that I've used quite often, and it's meaningful work, right? We all want to do meaningful work, whatever we're doing, whether it's waiting tables, whether it's working the line in a factory, whether it's on a garbage truck, whether it's the executive of a company. It doesn't really matter. Whatever we're doing, we as humans need to feel fulfilled when we want to be doing meaningful work. So I think if you make that switch, you're doing it because it's a passion, it's a dream of yours, it's a chance, and it is scary. It's very scary, especially with inflation the way it is. If you have families, if you have anybody that you have to, if any kind of dependence, even if it's just yourself, and you have to focus on yourself and keeping a roof over your own head. How am I going to make these payments? How am I going to be able to eat? Those are real things. That's life. But if you feel fulfilled, if you feel that you're doing meaningful work, that will be recognized. You can't fake that. When you meet somebody who truly loves what they do and somebody who doesn't. We all know those people in the office, in the business world, in any kind of job. Somebody who just doesn't like what they do, it's just a job for them. And we also know the people who love what they do, and all they do is this, because they're so passionate, they're so invested in it, right? They're doing meaningful work. It means something to them. And I think that if you're doing that, if you're making that switch, you have nothing to worry about.
I think that's amazing. I think meaningful work, hands down, you have to have a passion for it. And I think right now, especially, people sometimes get fearful and you chase the money, and there are a lot of great opportunities out there right now. We have to kind of make sure that there is some interest in that job, because to your point, starting from the bottom, if you are passionate and if you're interested in what you're doing, you will work harder and you will be more invested, and then you will get those opportunities more often than not. Maybe it's not going to always happen, but more often than not, you're going to set yourself up those opportunities. So I think that's great. Before I ask my big question, what advice, as I keep asking all the advice from you, just we're sponges, we're soaking it all up, do you have for somebody in an interview? What mistakes are they making, really? And what advice do you say, stop making this big mistake that I keep seeing people make in interviews or when they're applying, whether it be, they're exaggerating things, they're not necessarily being themselves. What kind of mistakes are out there?
I think, I've seen so many different kinds of interviews, and it really depends on the job, right? So I'm gonna have this as like a two-part answer. So you have maybe more of like a blue collar type of job, right? Where you don't need to have a certain education. It's just basic skills. Again, whether that is, sweeping streets or working the line of a factory or processing, anything, where it's just straight up kind of manual labor work. I think people come into those interviews thinking, I see people lay back in their chairs. I see people saying, yeah, they don't need any education. They don't need certain criteria, maybe. And they feel that just by showing up, they're getting a job. I think in that kind of position, you still need to put your best foot forward. And, obviously you're not going to come to an interview for something like that dressed in a business suit, because that's just a little ridiculous. We've all seen Step Brothers. It just doesn't work that way. But you want to make sure that you're going to whatever interview you are on and it coincides with the job that you're doing. I think that kind of goes for both, right? So if I'm going to an interview for, I don't know, for a restaurant, I'm not going to really wear a suit where I'm going to be serving tables. I'll wear something business casual. I'll just, how I would normally look. You don't want to show up to an interview and then you show up on your first day and like, who the heck is this person? Like, this is not the person that I saw. That's a big misconception too. So, tailor your attitude, your questions, your preparations, your attire to the job interview that you're going to. That's really, really important. So if I'm going to an interview for an executive type position within a company and there's going to be like 4 or 5 different interviews, it's going to be a panel. Yes, of course, I'm going to dress professionally. I'm going to be very well educated. I might have a business proposal if it's something along that line. That's how I would tailor that. So you really need to understand the role, the job, and it's okay to actually ask people before the interview, whoever's conducting it, do you suggest what kind of attire do you wear during the day? It's okay to ask those questions. I actually had somebody do that once where they said, is it acceptable for me to wear jeans to the interview? And I thought it was great. Now, whether or not, whether or not they, it was or was not acceptable, they asked. And to me, that was like, I loved that. I thought that was great. Another thing during interviews is we always say, make sure you have questions for the company. I get that. That is great, but they should be valid questions, right? So you should do your homework about whatever job you're about to take is, whether you're trying to look up reviews online, whether somebody who works there and you want to pick their brain, you just drive by it and kind of see where it is. Maybe it's a place you've frequented as a customer, if it's customer facing, whatever the case may be, do your homework. And one thing I can say is there have been people who feel I've experienced where they've asked a question in the interview. And if they really went on the website or did the little homework, they'd be able to find those answers. So make sure whatever questions you're asking, you couldn't already find that information out somewhere, right? The questions should be something like, tell me about some of your longest term employees. What departments are they in? Tell me about what changes you've had in the company in the past X amount of years in this department, or the position I'm applying for. Has it always been with the company? Is it a newer position? And if it's been around for a while, tell me how it's evolved in the past, 2 years. Things like that you really can't find out unless you work there. So really think about those questions when you're sitting in an interview. You don't want to sit there and ask them, how many employees do you have? You can probably find that information out online. And it makes you look like you didn't do your homework when you're really trying to make it look the opposite. So it kind of backfires on you there. So make sure that you're asking questions that you won't be able to find the information somewhere out there for.
Great advice. I think with the questions, you're so right. It's always been that you have to ask questions, but those questions, those example questions you gave, really also prepare yourself for then starting that position, because with the question specifically on asking about the role and how long it's been, if it's also a newer role in today's day and age with these layoffs that we're seeing, I mean, David's Bridal just announced 9,000 layoffs. So all these changes, making sure that you have job security also, or then to your point, if it's been around for a while, okay, well, how has it evolved? So definitely amazing. And I think it helps you start at that position and not make some of those errors once you're starting. So appreciate it immensely. So Recruit Me, right? The app is all about recruiting yourself. What does the term Recruit Me mean to you as an HR and payroll professional?
I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying about be always educating yourself, be always growing. We can all be stagnant in our lives, professional, personal, and you need some kind of change. It's like, okay, this is getting old fast. always be growing, always be evolving, right? And for people who may be more introverted, recruit me is a very scary phrase. It's like, rather just, don't reach out to me. Like, like I'm okay. But you need to be an advocate for yourself. I know you said that before too, Katerina, and you have to be your own advocate. You are your best advocate for yourself is you. And you have to have that confidence in yourself. And it's scary. It's very scary. For some people, that do not have that, or do not have the resources to, like maybe they don't have friends or family or a support system. And that is very scary. I understand that. So you really need to make sure that if you're, recruit me, why me? What makes me special? We all know what makes each of us special. Sometimes we don't acknowledge it. Maybe somebody else acknowledges it for us, but there is something in you that makes you different from the other person. And you have to find out what that is. And if you're always growing, and if you're always learning, and if you're being that sponge, you'll find it. You may not even realize it, but you'll find it in there somewhere.
Thank you so much. I want to make sure that our listeners can find you. So I'll direct them obviously to your LinkedIn page. I know you shared your email with me, so I'll go ahead and include that as well. Very excited for your new position as well. And I think this was amazing. I can't thank you enough for the advice that you shared, really from sort of that pulling back the curtain, right? You're the person behind the curtain on the other side, sort of like that wealth of knowledge. And I think we definitely learned we need to educate ourselves. We need to be reminded at all times that people are working for people and that we're all human, and ultimately just putting your best foot out there. And networking is so important nowadays. Everything can be so daunting, but really to your points, I think if you don't take that first step, then you really will always be in the same place that you are. And sometimes you're not meant to be there always. So I can't thank you enough. Any other closing comments, anything that we need to make sure we share before we close out?
No, I mean, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I hope that the listeners understand that HR isn't scary, and we're here to help you. As long as your company has the right people in place, and don't be afraid to take those chances. It's a different world than it was 5, 10, 15 years ago. It's very exciting. So if you have any kind of questions, comments, concerns, anything, feel free to reach out to me. Katerina will give my email. We always go down in the public sector. There's something called the League of Municipalities Conference, which is every year, the week before, Thanksgiving in Atlantic City. And it's all New Jersey public sector. It's a huge 3-day conference, right? It's a huge networking event. So if anybody that works in the public sector or even private sector doesn't know about that, definitely I suggest going. It's a wealth of knowledge. Even if you are in private industry, I definitely think it's something, because you have different attorneys talking about legal updates, things like that. It's a great networking event. It's great for education and knowledge. So that's my one little piece of advice, is definitely find those events that you can go to educate yourself and network at the same time.
Thank you. Great. Hopefully some of our listeners attend. You get to meet some people. To see if I can attend them. That's great. Week before Thanksgiving. Okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Jessica. It was so nice to see you. So nice to talk to you again. And I thank you again for coming on and sharing all your tips and tricks.
Thank you so very much, Katerina.
Goodbye, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, and remember to recruit yourself.